Hi, I'm Martin McGrath from Financial Edge Group. Today I'm going to answer a question about how we value shares and a certain thing called a PE ratio. So what a PE ratio is it's the price to earnings on a share. And quite simply, it's how we measure a share to figure out, is it cheap, is it expensive, and how does it compare to what it's earning. Kind of like a rental property, and to figure out what's the rental yield, what's it going to cost, what's the rent, it's kind of like with a share. What's the cost of the share, and what are the earnings I'm going to get from that share? So I've just given us a bit of an example here. I've written up on the board of a company. We're assuming this is the same company with just its price and its earning fluctuating. It's actually been taken from an example we've seen in this year with COVID, with the share price in particular, but let's just follow this along. So how do we figure out what the PE ratio is? It's simply the price of the share that we're paying for it divided by the earnings. So what is that company making in its earnings per share? So how much does it make its profit? How many shares are there? And what are its earnings per share? If you quickly Google what are the earnings per share on a certain share, you'll be able to find that number pretty easy. And from there, you'll be able to figure out the PE ratio. So the general rule with PE ratios is the lower, the better. The lower means it's cheaper. We're getting more earnings for the price we're paying. So for example, here, the price of this stock basically is $80, and each share is earning $5 per share. So that makes the PE ratio 16 times. We're paying 16 times per earnings to get that price. Is that fair value? It probably is. PE ratios kind of hover around that 16 times. Some companies are cheaper, might be attractive. Some companies are more expensive, and there's reasons, there's more complexity with this, but that's how we measure that. If that company goes up to $100 and it's still only making the same $5 per share, that makes the PE ratio 20 times. You might look at this stock and go, oh, it's gone up, it must be going really well. But if its price gone up and the earnings have it, essentially you're paying more for that company for the same amount of earnings. Is that a good thing? Is it not? Well, it depends upon your situation and what your thoughts are of that price of the stock in the future, but essentially it's more expensive here than it is here at 16 times. And that brings us down to this example. If you focus just on the price and don't look at the earnings, you can sometimes miss it. So for example, instead of it going up from 80 to 100, let's say it went from 80 down to 60. The share price was $20 cheaper. And you look at this stock going, wow, it was at 80, now it's at 60, it must be a great buy, it's such a bargain. But if at the same time, the earnings dropped from $5 to $3 a share, i.e. it wasn't making as much profit, something happened, it impacted its profits, the earnings were a lot less per share. The PE ratio actually works out to be 20 times. So in effect, that's a better buy than this one here is, because the PE ratio is lower. So if you gave me the choice of buying a stock at $80 that was making 5, or a stock at 60 that was making 3, even though 60 is cheaper, that's always the better buy out of those options. So it's important to look at those together. Sometimes the reason the price of the share has gone down is because the earnings have gone down as well. So we measure that on the PE ratio. Super simple. Final one. Opposite, if you bought at $60 and now it was $100, you might go, oh, it's really expensive. I want to get rid of it. Doesn't make sense to hold it anymore. It's already gone up a lot. If at the same time the earnings has gone up, and in this case I've made it a bit extreme, but let's say the earnings were $10 a share, that makes the PE ratio 10 times, which is if you hold that company for 10 years, 10 times it earns that money, you'll get your price back. So again, if you just look at the price and go, oh, that's expensive, this actually out of all those 4, that's your best option. So look at the price and the earnings together, and that will give you your PE ratio. Hopefully that's helped. There was a question we got about how PE ratios worked. What are they? How do we calculate them? How do we measure shares? So you can find the price and you can find the earnings, you'll know your PE ratio. So look beyond just the share price itself. Hopefully that's helped. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out and ask us a question. If you've got a particular question about your situation, feel free to pick up the phone, have a chat with us, or jump on our website at financialedgegroup.com.au.